across higher education over the better part of the last 2 or 3 months has just been a elevation and prioritizing of the demands of protesters and professional agitators over the interests of a vast majority of their students, including Jewish students, and an interference with the normal operation of these institutions that's undermined, among other things, the teaching and learning process. And it's made it very difficult for Jewish students and others alike to continue with their education and benefit from the services that have been promised by these institutions. And as of late, we just had Senator Rubio in Florida demand that Columbia, among others, reimburse students and parents for the loss of educational services that they've experienced as a result of the involvement of protesters and professional agitators on their campuses. And I'm hoping that there is some action there, and that parents and students will be much more critical consumers about where they're going to spend their education dollars and consider the way these institutions have handled these protests.
Yeah, and to Senator Rubio's point, college is expensive. And when you go to a school like Columbia or Harvard, that is a lot of money. I mean, how much, but give me a ballpark figure of how much it costs to get a 4-year degree at Columbia.
Well, at Columbia, the cost of attendance at Columbia is around $80,000 a year, so times 4. And they make all types of representations about what educational services and experiences you're going to benefit from if you pay that kind of money to attend Columbia. When Columbia then, for example, cancels commencement activities for undergraduate students, or cancels in-class, in-person instruction, and goes to remote instruction and effectively closes its campus down, you're not providing the goods and services that you promised. And I hope parents and students will pursue breach of contract complaints, among others, against these institutions.
The pro-Palestinian campus protests that we've seen at Columbia and elsewhere, as you know, interfere with classroom instruction. It created unsafe conditions on campus, and it led to some of the students actually having to leave school and try to do things virtually, almost going back to COVID days. And those students were Jewish students. But I'm also curious, Ken, what about the Christian students who support the Jewish students and they support each other, or even the Islamic students who support Christian students and Jewish students? Everybody supporting each other except the protesters who are anti-Israel, anti-America. What's going on?
Sure, these students, all the students you've identified, were negatively impacted by the weak, anemic, and timid response from so many presidents in higher education around the country. And that's really unfortunate. I think in many ways, presidents lost their way in addressing these protests immediately and decisively. I think some of them confused their own views and opinions about Israel with their role and responsibility as the chief operating officer of their institution. I think others were just frankly frozen in fear to act at all because they feared being labeled an oppressor under the diversity, equity, and inclusion dogma of the day. But whatever the reason, they've undermined their ability of their institution to provide teaching and learning. They have jeopardized safety and security for all these students on campus. And they really have done nothing more than incentivize future mob action, which is of concern.
It's a concern indeed. And right now, we're in a summer recess, but eventually students will be coming back to campus. Correct. If you were advising college presidents right now, as well as their admissions board and their board of regents and the entire body of faculty and staff, what would be your advice to them about leadership that serves all students equally and fairly?
Sure. First thing I do is I put all presidents and all college administrators and all their boards of trustees through a First Amendment training so that they could understand the distinction between peaceful protest and what we saw on many of these college campuses, which was not peaceful protest, which was not protected under the First Amendment, which was more tantamount to harassment, threats, intimidation, vandalism, damage of property, interference with the normal operation of the institution, none of which finds cover under the First Amendment. And I think that would be my first step. Second would be to look at college and university policies, procedures and policies to ensure that those policies protect the right of free speech on campus, but then also underscore and use as a stark contrast, in many cases, the illegal conduct that we saw engaged on our campus and unfortunately tolerated by administrators and presidents. And third, I think boards of trustees really need to evaluate the performance of their presidents under these circumstances and make some very tough decisions about whether they want the same individuals leading their
That'd be a
campuses come
bunch of people
September.
getting fired.
You're a parent, and you've seen what's happened on these college campuses. What do you say to your child who is scratching his or her head saying, my goodness, have I made the right choice in going to the school of my choice, and finding out that it's now disrespecting me and my faith? Yeah, how do you advise your child and work alongside your child to help them maneuver through this treacherous path that they're facing right now?
Sure. I mean, if I was a parent right now of a high school student considering college education, I would absolutely spend some time scrutinizing the way in which individual campuses handle the protests and the result of their actions or inaction. And I think, again, parents and students need to be much more critical consumers about what representations are made by institutions and whether they fulfill those promises when you're on campus. Or do they capitulate and respond to the demands of the mob and the professional agitators when pushed? And I think parents and students should really be critical about where they're going to spend their educational dollars and find institutions that at the same time support free speech and expression and also provide unwavering support for the teaching and learning process. And if you can't find that, then I'd go elsewhere.
Yeah, and many students are doing that. Many students are electing to go elsewhere. For example, Yeshiva University here in New York, which of course is a Jewish college, or university I should say, has seen an increase in enrollment. But as the president of that great institution has stated, we can't take everybody in. So there has to be there has to be other institutions that can be able to accept students from all backgrounds. And we do see an increase in that many Jewish students are now opting to go elsewhere. Christian universities, Catholic universities, they're all basically saying, we welcome you with open arms. And that's really good, because I think it shows an alliance, a moral alliance between people of different faiths, acknowledging and appreciating and understanding and recognizing people of faith, and making sure that they have that and can still have a good education.
Sure. And look, I also think it's important for parents to seek to align with organizations like Campus Reform, who have pursued a number of legal actions against higher educational institutions for potential violations under federal law. And I think Congress also needs to act and use as a threat the withholding of or reduction of Title VI funding for these institutions where they failed to provide a safe and secure environment. And, I also, in my experience over 21 years, I advised over 50 college presidents. And among their duties and responsibilities, one of the things I emphasized to them that at the end of the day, their ultimate responsibility was to provide a safe and secure campus. And without that, nothing could follow. There's no teaching and learning. There is no open exchange of ideas and discussion and dialogue. And there's no academic freedom. And for those presidents that capitulated to the demands of the mob, I would again hope that their boards of trustees are paying some attention to that and are going to take appropriate steps come fall.
What you said is really so important, because at the end of the day, it really is about education, shining a brighter light for our students to show, and giving students the hope that they need to elevate their status in life and reach out and help others. That's really what I value my higher education in teaching me to be a better citizen. I may not always get it right, but at least I have that education. And the school that I went to had a moral code that I had to adhere to, even as a young adult trying to find my way. Have we lost that in America?
Well, I mean, I sure think a lot of us believe that and have grave concerns about that. And it's important to always keep attention and focused on that issue and try to do the right thing when we can do the right thing. And I also want to add, though, too, that I'm not encouraging Muslim students on campus simply because they may express a conflicting or differing view from others. I think that's at the core of First Amendment protections. I don't think we do enough of an ideological focus on our campuses. We spent a lot of years talking about affirmative action based on race. I'd like to see some cases the focus be less on sort of what people look like and more on what people think. Because there is a value to having ideological diversity on our campuses and to allow and encourage and really demand that people engage in the kind of open dialogue, discussion, debate that leads to, if not an understanding of the other side, at least a tolerance of the other side. And I really feel that that's where we have failed collectively, and in particular in the higher educational setting.
You know, you're touching on something, and I want to talk about that. I need to take a break. When I come back from the break, I want to talk about that common ground we need to find on our college campuses, because it will bode well for the country when these college students grow up and become leaders of corporate America. I'm talking to Ken Toschi. We'll be back in just a moment.